welcome to Inside Tacoma. I'm your host, Sonia Hallam. I'm joined today by Washington State House of Representatives Speaker Laurie Jinkins. Hi, Speaker Jinkins, welcome to Inside Tacoma.
Great to be here with you today, Sonia.
So you represent the 27th district, and the districts in the state are different than our council districts. In Washington, we have 49 legislative districts.
Yep.
Each of them has 2 representatives and 1 senator. The 27th district is one of those districts. Can you talk about what area that covers?
Yeah, so we just finished redistricting this last year, so this is a new district for the 27th. It's really almost the entire city of Tacoma now. It goes all the way to the Narrows and then into the 50s, the South 50s. In terms of Tacoma. We also represent a much larger part of Fife than we've ever represented, so we're happy to have Fife join the 27th family, and of course the city of Ruston. So that's really the district. The part that we no longer represent that used to be in the 27th is the east side of Tacoma. That is now represented by the 29th legislative district.
Okay, and that's new. That just was last year.
Yes, last year.
Great.
Every 10 years we redistrict.
Okay.
So. Yeah.
And you have been in the legislature since 2010 and the speaker since 2020.
Yep.
Is that correct?
Yep.
So what does that mean? What does it mean to be the Speaker of the House?
Well, the Speaker's job, it's the only legislative job that's both constitutionally mandated, and the other thing is it's elected by the entire House of Representatives. So all the other 4 caucuses have a leader of their caucus that either if they're in the majority, like the Democrats are in the Senate, there's a Senate majority leader, and then the Republicans are in the minority, there's a Senate minority leader. Those are elected by their caucuses. The House minority leader that on the Republican side is elected by that caucus, but I am actually nominated by my caucus to serve as speaker, and then I stand for vote of the entire body. So I'm elected by the entire body, which is a big deal. It's a public election. I've been pleased that I've had bipartisan support the last 2 times, or every time I've run for speaker. And the job is really to run the place. Like I'm responsible for the operations of the place, staffing decisions and policies that the House puts in place to run the House of Representatives. But I think on the side that constituents might be interested in, I also chair the Rules Committee, which is the committee that decides what bills come to the floor for consideration. So I have responsibilities related to that and reviewing all bills, to leading our caucus. And then I also have responsibilities on the political side of things too.
That's a very significant and important leadership role for the legislature, and I think we're really lucky as a city to have you in that leadership position for us.
Yeah, I mean, I love representing the people of the 27th district, and it's my favorite job that I've ever done. And I do think being speaker actually just adds to that, helps me exercise leadership in ways that help people in the district. With things like capital budget and transportation issues, which we have leadership in our delegation on that too. Yasmin Trudeau is one of the leaders negotiating the capital budget on the Senate side, and Jake Fife, my other seatmate, is chair of the Transportation Committee. So we are the 27th is very, very well represented in the legislature.
Yes, we have fantastic leadership in the 27th. Your election as Speaker, though, was pretty historic. You are the first woman and the first lesbian person to be elected Speaker. I feel like it's so important to have diversity and to have leadership that reflects the community and diverse positions in the community. And I'm wondering from your perspective, how has that been reflected in your leadership as a speaker and as a legislator, and also for your caucus, the diversity that we're seeing in the caucus?
Yeah, thanks for that question. It's very hard for me to know if the way that I lead is based on gender or the fact that I'm lesbian. But I would say one of the things that's been very important to me is to lead collaboratively and distribute power throughout the caucus and the body, so that, for example, the committee chairs that are chairing all sorts of committees where they know a lot about the substantive topic areas, they're experts in those topics, that they have a lot of power to decide what bills to move and what bills not to move. I try not to make those decisions from my corner office. And so I try and distribute that kind of power and leadership. I also really believe that the more that we collaborate and work together across the political, what people think of as political divide, the better solutions we'll have for all Washingtonians. So we work very hard on bipartisan solutions. But the other thing that's been really great since I became Speaker is when I was first elected, I was one of maybe a quarter of the caucus were women, and there were a few members of color. The rest of the members were white men. Of our caucus were white men. And now we look and we have much more diversity in our caucus. We're a majority female, and 47% of our caucus are members of color. The thing that's great about that is it brings more diversity of thought and of experience in particular into our decision making. And so sometimes it makes decision making, it can make it harder or longer because you're getting a lot more diverse viewpoints. But I really feel strongly that the more diverse viewpoints you get, even if it does take sometimes a longer time to make the decisions, they're always better because they represent decisions that will work for more people in the state of Washington. So I'm really proud of that part of our caucus. I'm also very proud of the bipartisan work we do. People don't really know this, but probably about usually between 93 and 96% of the bills we pass off the House floor have bipartisan votes. This year it was 94% of the bills, and somewhere in the high 80s are unanimous votes off the floor of the House, highly bipartisan. We work really hard to do that, so I often have to tell people, especially when I'm traveling in other parts of the country and I say I'm from Washington, I'm like, not that Washington. I'm from the good Washington, the Washington that works in a bipartisan way and really brings diverse voices to our decision making.
So I knew there was a high level of bipartisanship in the bills that are moved. I really didn't realize it was that high. I think that's so important, and maybe we can talk a little bit about that. Mm-hmm. It's in the dynamic that we're seeing across the country. There is so much divisiveness, and there isn't that collaborative, even an interest in being collaborative to reach decisions that are mutually beneficial. How have you seen that playing out here in Washington, and do you see it improving? Is it like the same as it has been? You've been in this position for a long time.
Yeah.
How do you see it?
I do think there's a tumult going on in our communities, in our culture, a lot of disequilibrium caused by a lot of things, including the pandemic, but lots of other things too. And I don't think we're on the other side of that yet. But I think that what's important in the House that I work in is that we keep on trying to work on that. We keep on working on being bipartisan, on trying to find bipartisan solutions. And the other thing is just being honest with each other when we, as members, when we don't agree on things. And we're not going to see eye to eye on every single topic. I think one of the hard things is the only thing that really draws much attention is the things where we don't agree. The things where we do agree, we just do our work, and that doesn't really raise much attention for people. So people are always surprised to hear how much bipartisanship there is. But I guess I just feel strongly that what you have to do is keep on working and working to build relationships and working to listen to voices of people who feel like they're not being heard. We have had that so much in communities of color, and that many of the pieces of legislation that we've passed over the last few years are to try and bring more voice and listening to communities that we have used policy and law to exclude them from having a voice. But I was just a week ago, I was touring through Eastern Washington, meeting with members, mostly on the Republican side, meeting with members in their districts and talking with them. And certainly in rural Washington, there can be that experience too of not really feeling heard there. So that's work that we need to continue doing too.
So some of the issues that were addressed in the session last year, I think were ones that impact the entire state, right? The whether you're in Eastern Washington or Western Washington, such as housing. That was a pretty significant issue. The way that the state is involved in housing issues is very different than the role of local government. So the state will set statewide policies and requirements and provide funding, and the local jurisdictions are then required to implement it. Can you talk about some of the housing bills and policies that were passed, and how do you think they're going to impact what we're doing here in Tacoma?
Yeah. I think, our high-level focus area last year was we wanted to build supply, we wanted to stabilize housing, especially that relates to renters, I think, and we wanted to support folks who needed housing and to get into that. So I think on the supply side, we passed a bill, a middle housing bill, which frankly, the work that the Tacoma City Council did on Tacoma's, I always forget, yeah, Home in Tacoma, I always forget what it's called, but Home in Tacoma was really the model for what the state policy is based on, and I don't think people will see much change in Tacoma based on that bill, but we will see changes in other parts of the state, which is really good because we can't do all of the infill housing. We can't do all of the middle housing in the state. We need other jurisdictions to be doing that too, and it's going to require other jurisdictions really participate in the way that the city of Tacoma did. And I think one of the things I really have applauded the city of Tacoma for doing is, while everybody might not agree with the policies that have been adopted, there has been no shortage of engagement in every single neighborhood and really talking to community and trying to address community needs as that policy is getting adopted. And I really hope that we'll see other jurisdictions do that. We also passed a bill on accessory dwelling units to allow more ADUs to be built, which are kind of mother-in-law houses kind of in people's backyards. Again, we're trying to get more density, more housing built. I guess I should just back up, Sonia, and say we had a report at the very beginning of session last year, very troubling, which said that Washington State right now is between 100,000 and 150,000 units short of the housing needs for the people who live in this state. And that over the next 20 years, we're going to have to build 1 million housing units in order to house the population that will live here. Over 60% of those are going to have to be for people who are low income or very low income. So again, that information really guided us in what we did. I think one of the things that we'll work on a lot more this next session is that stabilization piece. I have heard from many people in the district, especially a number of seniors who live in rental housing, who report to me and have given me all kinds of documents show, some of them, at least a couple of them, that their rent has increased by 71% in a 2-year period. They are on Social Security. They are not getting particularly more, they're not able to make more income. They're retired. And that kind of rental increase is really destabilizing to somebody who is already living in a home. So I think we're going to be looking at what is it that we can do to support there. The big thing that we did last year is we provided more rental assistance money for people. And I think then, the supports that we give, when I say that 60% of the housing we need to build is for low income or extremely low income people, that means that that's got to be housing, I think, that the state really invests in building and works in cooperation with cities and counties to do that, because our for-profit development community has not shown much ability or interest to build those low-income housing units. So last year we had a historic investment in the Housing Trust Fund. I think it was $500 million, which is the most we've ever invested, and that money all goes to build housing for folks who are low income or extraordinarily low income. So those are all things that we worked on last year. It's not going to be an overnight solution, in part just because building takes a long time to do. We also worked a lot on permitting things so that it's easier for folks to build when they decide they want to build, and it takes less time and it brings down cost. So those are all going to be things that we continue to work on this next session, and I think in years to come.
So as you mentioned, Home in Tacoma has been essentially a model for how that was done.
Absolutely.
The city's also been invested in the homelessness strategy, which is somewhat connected to clear the housing issues. The work that's being done around homelessness, very much like housing, is again, the state is providing the assistance and the local jurisdictions are implementing and trying to address it. Here in Tacoma, with the homelessness strategy, as you know, the idea is that there is a significant investment in the shelter housing with the goal of reducing the shelter beds so that we can move into more permanent and long-term solutions. But there is such a demand. How do you see the state's role in helping cities to address the homelessness issue, and how do you see it playing out here in Tacoma?
I think there's a few things, and they're mostly related to budget that we do. First of all, I think our investments in low-income housing, and we actually provided a lot of investments in these shelter beds, and are now putting some investment into transitioning some of those into more permanent housing. You know, this last year in the capital budget, I think we also invested. I think Shiloh Baptist is building housing for low-income folks, and they got a significant grant in the state capital budget. Likewise, in the Lincoln District, we have a building for low-income seniors that we invested in. So that's a lot of what the state can do, is invest financially. We really rely on cities and city government to try and identify those projects and let us know and get shovel ready and be prepared to do the permitting quickly, because it's mostly local permitting, not state permitting, that takes time. So we really want cities to engage. And this, again, the city of Tacoma has engaged quite heavily in doing this. Just the mere building of housing, of all types of housing, we know we have shortages of all kinds of housing, is very, very important. The Pew Charitable Trust just told us that the cost of housing is the #1 thing contributing to homelessness. And it does it because it contributes because it's cost prohibitive. But the other thing that happens is, even when you have shortages at a higher end of housing, somebody who could buy a $500,000 house but can't find one, even though they have a $500,000 to spend, they'll buy a house at $250,000. And then people who could buy a house at $250,000, they go downstream and they buy a $100,000 house, and you can see what happens. That ends up pushing the lowest income folks in our community into not having accessible housing at all, because we have shortages everywhere.
Right. And I just want to take a pause and recognize that you were instrumental in some very important appropriations for the city, and one of them was funding for an affordable housing land acquisition that goes just right to what you're saying. The ability for the city to purchase that land, to be able to then have affordable housing built on that. And your leadership has been key to helping with that. And some other things I just want to acknowledge that you have been really important and pivotal in actually bringing these things to the city. So this year, the $1.9 million to continue the guaranteed basic income program here in Tacoma. The very important, it was
really
huge.
like it.
That was huge.
Yeah, it's a great program.
A very important library renovation, because the libraries are so important to the communities and provide so much more than they ever did to enrich and provide basic access to the community. The Asian Pacific Cultural Center, and so many other programs and services that your leadership has brought into the city that I don't think would necessarily have been here were it not for you. So thank you for your leadership.
Thank you. The delegation works as a team to do that, and but I'm really proud of the work that we've done bringing capital budget dollars into the community to help build our community and make it stronger. I think one of the other pieces, now that you're mentioning this, is we also invested a significant amount of money in the multicultural child care center, and we know that child care shortages are a huge problem for families in Tacoma and across the state. So really helping one of the best child care centers in the state of Washington expand and be able to provide more child care here in our community, I think was another good thing. I have a list a mile long, but it's been really exciting to be able to do that work.
Yes, I think overall the year was very exciting for the things that so much was brought to help the community and directly provide access to services and housing and things that are just fundamental to the people in the community.
Yeah, and we also got the chance to think long term too. One of the other things we did is we helped the University of Washington Tacoma branch campus purchase the rest of the land for the original footprint for that branch campus. So the state now owns the whole footprint for the development of the University of Washington Tacoma branch campus. There was some threat that it was going to be developed in different ways if we didn't do that. Mm-hmm. So that that won't, again, the whole branch campus won't be built overnight. For those of us who've lived here a long time, we remember when none of it was built and it was all old closed warehouses. And as we invest year after year, and we see what a wonderful treasure we now have in our community because of those investments over time.
The investments into the UW Tacoma are important for education, but also driving the economic development in the area is significant.
Absolutely, and then the students that they produce who live here and stay here in Tacoma, and the incredible work that they do throughout the community. It's one of the most virtuous cycles of investments we could ever make.
Yes. So looking back on your lengthy career. So talk to me about some of the things that you're most proud of, some of the accomplishments that you've had.
It's funny when you talk about a lengthy career, because I feel relatively new to this work, which I think is great. It's one of the great things about this job. And when I say this job, I mean both just as a legislator and as Speaker of the House. I always think it's one of those jobs that you can become more masterful at every year, but you never master it. And I remember when I was in my freshman term, I sat on the floor next to two of the most senior members in the House. And that first year, both of them came to me at different times and asked me for advice on what to do about a bill. And I was shocked, but that's the thing that taught me, like no matter how long you serve here, there are still things that come up that you don't know how to handle, and you need advice from somebody else. And one of them is very funny because I gave her advice and she's like, "That's never going to work. I'm not doing that." But then later on, she asked me about a different thing. She said, "I think that might work. I'm going to try that." Right? So, and I find myself doing that, but I am also asking new members, what do you think we should do about this? How do you think we should handle it? Because that new inflow of information, along with people who've been around a while, that really, when you mix that all together just right, that's what creates really great solutions. For me, I've been very proud, obviously, of the work, the investments in the city that I can drive around and see. Buildings that have been constructed, that have been saved, programs that we've made, guaranteed basic income program. We are the only program in the state of Washington. We're the only one that's being funded, and that's because the city of Tacoma got a grant. And I was able to make an argument to our budget team that, hey, we already have good data that shows this work. Why would we let this go? I know we can't do it throughout the state of Washington, but let's keep a good program going. And they were convinced to do that. For me, as the first out lesbian running for the legislature, marriage equality will always be one of the highlights of my career and of my life. It let me get married to my wife during the year of our 25th anniversary. So that is an incredible highlight and something that people are going to start seeing the benefits of in the next couple of years, the Long-Term Care Trust Act called the CARES Act, which will provide long-term care services to every worker in Washington State in the next couple of years. Right now, people are paying a little bit of a payroll tax to fund that, and then they'll, over time, be able to use that to help with their long-term care, because we don't want people having to spend themselves into poverty in order to get care.
I think that those few examples they speak volumes about the monumental work that you have done over these, which you say are not very many years, but it's been impressive how much that you have done. That really, not just for the city of Tacoma, obviously, but for the entire state of Washington. I think we're very lucky to have you as a speaker.
I feel honored to have the job, Sonia, and I intend to try and keep it for a bit longer.
Well, thank you so much for joining me here today. It's been a pleasure having you.
It's been great to be here.
And thank you for watching today on Inside Tacoma. We'll see you next time.